YouTube, welcome back to the channel. It is about 43 degrees right now. I'm at a spring with my friends Luke, Ben, and Sam, who happen to be all brothers. And it's gonna be a cold night in the spring. We're gonna get in and see what's hanging out there in the cold and hopefully not freeze our little booties off. So, hope you guys enjoy the video. I'll see you out there.
Oh man, it's so cold. It's all in your head. You can always do jumping jacks. Warm up down. I'll send you the coldest part of the spring, Sam.
It's really cold, but we're ready. So here we go, boys.
Oh. It's got reflective little thingies on it.
Oh, that's okay.
You might have blown out the image, yeah.
The four of us, me with my camera and everyone else with their flashlights, headed out into the dark water. To start, we struck off for the headspring. It quickly drops off to 15 feet deep, and it was cool to see my friends' lights swinging through the darkness like crazy long lightsabers. We reached the headspring and shone our lights down into it. The actual mouth of the headspring is about 25 feet deep, and I decided to dive down to check it out. Off to one side was a long, narrow cave that led back deep underground. The flow of the spring wasn't particularly strong, so I was able to stop and admire the designs in the limestone. There were little air pockets on the ceiling of the cave that looked like mirrors, probably the exhaled air of scuba divers trapped in the contours of the limestone. I didn't push into the tunnel, A, because for some reason I wasn't able to equalize very well tonight, and B, freediving overhead environments can be really dangerous, and we weren't set up to do it safely this evening, so I shot back up to the surface. After exploring the headspring and vent, we made our way to the edge of the spring where the cypress swamp started. Unfortunately, the open areas of the spring had no vegetation, and it was like crossing an empty wasteland. But then we came across the massive, buttressed base of an ancient cypress tree, and hundreds of tiny fish were darting about just below the surface. Some of the cypress tree trunks were totally hollow on the inside, and yet they were still alive. These hollow trunks and twisted roots provide excellent cover for fish, and I know other species of wildlife use them as well, but so far we were mostly just seeing smaller fish. Not far away, I stumbled across this crappie resting out in the open. These are pretty popular to fish for in Florida, and not surprisingly are often caught in cooler weather, which makes sense given tonight's chilly conditions. A little farther on, we came across a loggerhead musk turtle. These guys are common in the springs, and I've talked about them in other videos, but as a reminder, this is actually a fully grown adult turtle. Their big heads make them look like baby snapping turtles, which many people mistakenly call them, but they're an entirely different species of turtle. Their big head and strong jaws are mostly used for crushing snails, which is their main food source. I've been bitten by them many times and can confirm they pack quite a punch. As the turtle scurried off, we continued following along the edge of the cypress, and in the distance between some gnarled roots, I saw the unmistakable long shape of a chain pickerel. Chain pickerel are a type of pike, and although this species doesn't get as large as its northern relatives, they are incredibly fast and agile ambush predators. I tried to get close to this guy, but he blasted off pretty quickly. Hopefully I'll get another chance later on in the night. As we pushed deeper into the cypress, we discovered a bustling world of tiny fish. I couldn't get close enough to determine what they were, but they were everywhere. I also noticed the feathered ends of some cypress roots suspended in the water. Since they weren't hidden by dirt, it was pretty neat to get a glimpse at the anatomy of the base of the cypress trees underwater. I hoisted the camera above the surface to capture the eerie edge of the cypress swamp. And of course, you can't have cypress trees without cypress knees, which were jutting up everywhere. The knees are almost like small, pointed stumps that grow upright around the base of the actual trees. The purpose of these knees has puzzled scientists for a good while, but the general consensus is that they primarily give structural support to the main tree, since cypress trees often grow in soggy, wet, or flooded environments. They may also aid in gas exchange a bit, but it's not 100% clear to what extent they do that. Having made our way around most of the perimeter of the spring by now, we struck back across the barren sand. Remember, natural healthy springs typically have abundant native vegetation, like eelgrass and red Ludwigia. Unfortunately, there wasn't a green piece of vegetation in sight in this spring, besides the cypress. As we shined our lights into the darkness, one of my friend's beams illuminated that long, familiar shape again. It was another chain pickerel out in the open. I watched it for a second to see where it was headed and then dove down and followed after it. These fish are quite shy, but with a stroke of luck, I was able to catch up to it. They have a duck-like mouth that's lined with sharp teeth and they'll eat fish, crayfish, frogs, and even small mammals that are unlucky enough to run into a pickerel in open water. The record for this species is just over 9 pounds, but they typically don't get much longer than 2 to 3 feet. And of course, it wasn't long before he jetted off into the dark. I made my way back to Luke, Sam, and Ben, and they pointed to a small patch of algae on the bottom of the spring. As I got closer, I saw they had found a young American eel. Although common in Florida springs, these creatures are rarely seen as they are mostly active in the evenings. When this guy grows up, he'll actually travel all the way to the Atlantic Ocean to breed in the Sargassum Sea with other eels before he dies. You gotta be crazy to be an eel. A little farther on, I saw a sleeping bass, passed out on a ledge formed by the base of a massive fallen cypress tree. Although it was cold and kind of spooky in the spring, it also just felt kind of sleepy tonight. I didn't want to trouble him, so I moved on back to the headspring. I was still having trouble equalizing, but was able to dive down to take another peek into the cave. All this spring water is flowing up from the Floridan aquifer and is a constant temperature of about 72 degrees Fahrenheit. On a cold night like this, the water feels pretty nice at first, but after a few hours of slow, methodical exploration, the cold will really get to you. We were starting to feel it, so I headed back to the surface to go take one last look at some of the larger cypresses in the spring. The cold night air colliding with the relatively warm water of the spring caused a layer of fog to form above the surface as I looked up at a mighty cypress. I can only imagine what some of these trees might have looked like before the majority of Florida was logged. There are a few remaining old-growth cypress trees in the state, and imagining a whole swamp of giant cypress is enough to blow your mind, but this too was still a good tree, and I was happy to look up at it. As I turned to leave, I noticed a brilliant green color on the bottom. Sure enough, it was the roots of the cypress tree, vibrant and full of life. So I guess there's a bit of vegetation and wild left in these places yet. Alright, so we're going to try something a little different. Finally got a light for my drone so I can fly it at night. So we're going to see if I can get it up over the spring and get some decent footage if I use my lights in the water. There's a good chance, since it's going to be such low light, it's going to look really bad. I'm gonna put it in the video regardless, but it might be kind of cool. So we'll give it a shot, see how it goes. My drone's low-light abilities were certainly being pushed to the limit, but I was pleasantly surprised with what it captured. I've always wondered what it looked like from above as I swim with my camera and dive lights around a spring in the dark. I think it's safe to say it looks pretty rad. If looking up the cypress trees from underwater wasn't enough to make you feel small, looking down at your tiny lights bobbing about in the dark will really do it for you. I'm looking forward to getting better with night drone filming in the future. That is, so long as the navigation light doesn't give me or anyone else a seizure. Seriously, that thing is so bright. Also, shout out to Sam who swam around with my camera while I flew the drone as my fingers went numb from the cold. Well, I think the drone worked. It's going to be the grainiest footage of all time, but it still looks kind of cool. So, excited about that, and hopefully it can get a little bit better with that as time goes on. But anyway, a neat spring. It's neat to kind of get back in the Cypress a little bit. Oh man, it's really cold. But yeah, not as much life, unfortunately. You know, there's no vegetation on the bottom, and this spring does get quite a bit of traffic in the summertime. You know, not at like midnight. Still a lot of fish, it's neat wildlife. I did see, I'm pretty confident it was a giant grass carp, either that or the biggest mullet I've ever seen in my life. It was like 3 feet long, and I yelled at the guys that had seen it, and then when I looked back, it was coming straight towards me, and I couldn't hit record fast enough, and then it just disappeared into the blue. But I can't feel my fingers right now. Still good night. The worst part is by far getting out of the wetsuit when it's this cold. Luke, what's the final temperature reading for
Final
the
temperature is the nice even 40.
40.
And you feel it too. You really do out here.
I've got this towel. Here's my undies. Big ol'.
You ready? 3, 2, 1.
Oh no.
Don't watch out for the splash.